of different community agreements that you use that are similar to the ones that we're going to be sharing today.
And
So
I'll add that oh yeah, I'll just add that what we're doing is setting community agreements for this space, but we also invite you to use these in your Liberation School classes space.
yes, amazing, amazing. So some examples: move up, move back. I'm sure you all have different variations of this, so please drop them in the chat, right? This is really asking us to think about our airtime. How much conversation space are we taking up? How little conversation are we taking up, right? And so another version of this is wait, why am I talking versus why aren't I talking, right? What is the gift that this community loses when they don't hear from me? What is the gift that this community loses when I don't allow others to be heard? Right? That's one way to think about it. I statements are another example of community agreements that allow us to take responsibility for our opinions, our perspectives, our emotions, right? And so it's I feel this way instead of the general, when people act this way, people tend to have this reaction. Who does that help? Baby. Name your emotions. Talk about how you react. Talk about how you respond and why. It gives you your power back, right? And allows you to take responsibility for any harm that may occur when you are sharing your experience in a way that doesn't jive well with the boundaries of another. And then the last one I'll share for this tidbit is leaning into your growing edge, right? So when you're in shared spaces and you get a moment where you're like, ooh, that didn't feel right, or ooh, that's unfamiliar charted territory, that is when you don't break down, right? You don't shut off, you don't close off, you lean into that discomfort. You begin questioning the questions that come up for you, right? You're in relationship with the things that make you uncomfortable. And that's how you begin to grow into your leaning edge. Wei Ying, you want to take it from here?
Mm-hmm. So the next one we have after that is speak from your heart. And where that comes from is as human beings, we actually have multiple brains. So there's the head brain, there's the heart brain, and then there's also the gut. And oftentimes we're just moving from the top, but moving from a place of the heart is a really strong and like different indicator for like how one can show up in a space. And so speak from your heart. In our spaces, we like to follow that if your heart is beating really quickly, like as someone is sharing or as you're hearing something, that's often a sign from the universe that you are meant to share that with the collective because the collective can learn from it. Even if like you're not sure that that's like the right thing to say in the moment or how it'll be received, speaking from your heart moves you to share in that space. After that, we have listen to your body. So oftentimes in these Zoom meetings, we're kind of just like really heady, like looking at a screen. But listen to your body is really honoring where your body is at. So like if you need to get up and use the bathroom, but the facilitator is talking, you should use the bathroom. Same with like getting water. Same with if you need to like stand up and stretch in the middle of a meeting. Go ahead and do that. Rachel is modeling drinking water and listening to your body now. And the third one is remember, and so is Natasha. Oh my God. Shout out to water. The third one is remember the stories, leave the names. And so in our spaces here and also in your classes, you'll likely have moments where participants are being vulnerable in story sharing. And we encourage that unless you have explicit permission to attach the name to the story, you don't. But you can share like what you felt or like what you learned from someone without their names. So honor confidentiality. And I'll throw it back to Rachel.
Okay, amazing. This next one, yeah, I just gotta operate in the spirit of transparency and just be real with y'all about like where I stand with this next community agreement, and then you all just y'all make it work how y'all make it work. Okay, leave judgment at the door, out the door. I think so. One thing about community agreements is that all of them are aspirational, right? All of them are calling on the best versions of ourselves, right? So leaving judgment at the door, I think, is particularly challenging And sometimes it's like, well, shit, I can't do this, so I'm just not gonna do it. Me and my judgments are gonna come all the way up in this space, and we're just gonna be here, right? Okay. Instead of that, what I invite you all to consider as a community agreement is judging your judgments and questioning your questions, right? Because the judgments are gonna show up because of how we've been conditioned. We didn't sign up for this. Ain't nobody signed up for all this bias. Come on now. Come on, right? So to work through that, right, we have to be in relationship with the things that we have been taught. So judge your judgments, question your questions, right? And just be in that meta space. I think is a more productive invitation than just don't judge, because you're gonna do it. You're just gonna do it. Okay. Wayne, you want to hit this next one?
Yeah. So, in a similar vein, aspirationally, we encourage you to let go of other electronics, tabs, or emails. It can be really easy to multitask and like scatter your mind 20 different ways. If it is at all possible, try not to do that and encourage your participants to do the same. But at the same time, acknowledge that if there's an emergency and people need to be texting, that they should go and attend to that as well. And it's not an indicator of not being present. Throw it back to Rachel.
Thank you, love. And so this last one, I really think speaks to Maria's point in the chat about fearing about not asking the right questions or asking the question that you want, or like, when do I speak out? Like all of those things. Yo, Sierra from our last Liberation School cycle offered this community agreement, and I think it's a beautiful one. Cookie dough thoughts. You can have a cookie dough question, right? It's something that's not fully baked. It's not perfect yet, but it's still good. Because how many people eat the cookie dough? Because I just had some this morning for breakfast. Okay. Anyways, people. All right. So you want to create space for cookie dough moments, cookie dough questions, and things that are half baked. All right. I think that is the last bit on us, but we'll be back for more agreements, tips and tricks, and facilitation. And I'll pass it over to Jesus.
Hey everyone, my name is Jesus Martinez Montes. I'm the youth student residence at Integrate NYC and a youth political educator. And today I'll be talking to you about the history of freedom schooling. So before the Civil War, right, education was very limited for Black people all across the U.S. Right, Black education in the North varied from state to state. Right, some Black Northerners had access to education, right, but they often did not have control of the schools they attended, right, and had to fight against racist treatment and curricula. Right, in the South, the laws made it impossible for enslaved Black people to legally obtain an education, right? But they resisted by educating themselves secretly, right? And it was a pathway to freedom, right? Education was a pathway to freedom, as it allowed them to understand their oppression, which continued secretly until the Civil War. Right, and after the Civil War, right, one of the biggest demands by African Americans in the South was universal public education, right? That was tied to their newfound citizenship. And many African Americans pressured the states to get the demands after the war. And during Reconstruction, right, universal public education expanded in the South as a result of Black activism, right, that also benefited working class whites who did not have access to education before, right. And after Reconstruction ended in 1877, Jim Crow laws and intentional governmental segregation led to the decline of access and quality education for African Americans, right? However, right, transformative practices were still occurring in these segregated schools. So in the early 20th century, right, as Black people moved from the north, from to the north from the south, right, segregation got worse in the north, right, and the civil rights movement grew in response to Jim Crow laws in the south and segregation in the north, right, and Black activists continued to debate different strategies to achieve freedom. Some, like the Nation of Islam, right, favored the idea of all Black private schools that centered Black nationalism, right? While others were to address racism within the public school system, right? And after Brown v. Board, right? After Brown v. Board, many schools were still segregated, right? Even though there was a law passed down by the Supreme Court, schools were still segregated, and it failed to integrate the schools, right? It failed to do what it was supposed to do, right? And led to many student movements organizing and fighting for true integration in northern cities like Chicago, Boston, and New York City, right? And the first examples of freedom schooling were created in the North as an alternative space for students during these boycotts and during these protests, right? During the years of 1963 and 1964, right? And one of the prime examples of freedom schooling were the freedom schools created by SNCC, right? The Student Nonviolent Coordinated Committee in Mississippi, right? So freedom schools, right? The freedom schools created by SNCC in Mississippi, right? They provided an educational experience for young Black Mississippians to challenge the myths of society, right? Find alternatives to the segregated and white supremacist society, right? To understand the conditions of their oppression and to create directions for for actions in the name of freedom, right? Freedom schools and their history allow us to see alternative solutions to what schooling can actually look like, right? Schooling that nourishes intellectual curiosity, critical thinking, and consciousness development, right? Empowerment through our history and identity, right? And ways to understand the conditions of our oppression, to intervene in them in order to change them, right? Which is the opposite of what the DOE public school system achieves, right? And now I'll pass it on to Josh to speak about the next aspect of this.
And so the conditions that bred Freedom School were also the conditions that were causing mass civil unrest and uprisings in the mid 20th century and resulted in President Lyndon B. Johnson authorizing something called the Kerner Commission, which created a report that studied Black economic conditions, Black communities, and placed the faults of these conditions, which led to rioting, led to uprisings, led to Black people needing to create their own institutions squarely on things like white racism, economic exploitation, policing, et cetera. And so those were the conditions that created the Freedom School of the past. And so we have to look at those same conditions in the present and see, have they changed? And why are we creating something like a liberation school now? And when we look at those, this is something called the Kerner Commission report 50 years later, done by people at the UC Berkeley Institute of Othering and Belonging. They found that those conditions actually haven't changed. In fact, in some ways, they've gotten worse. And so we see the rise of mass incarceration. We see median household income, family wealth has barely moved. We see that Black people are still in poor neighborhoods. And so if these conditions haven't changed, then the solution also needs to continue on. And so with that report, we can understand that the fight continues. And thank you, Matt, for linking that right now. If anyone wants to follow up with those sources.
So thanks, Josh. And sorry about that. My computer went like really wonky right there for like a second, like went through all the slides. So my bad. Shout out to Jesus and Josh and Natasha and Carla, who have been doing an excellent job just grounding us. Shout out to the chat. I love the chats in our meetings. That's just evidence of just how we roll here, right? I wanted to talk a little bit about how Liberation Schools is going to provide support to community teachers this year. And then we're going to get into each of those subjects in a more intimate way. So we have class support. We're going to be providing class support, technical support, and skill development to teachers this year. Class support, Natasha's going to talk a little bit about best practices and language justice. I'll be talking a little bit about how to connect with class participants and what student feedback forms are looking like. And I'll be touching a little on promotion and outreach. I'll also be talking about tech support. Website and calendar Zoom support, how to use Zoom, how to record your class, and breakout rooms best practices. And then Josh is going to be talking about support and skill development that we're offering to teachers this year, which is a little bit different than last semester, which we're really excited about, and talking about culturally responsive teaching, workshops for community teachers that are coming up, and how we're working on team building this year with facilitators. So I'm going to throw it over to Natasha for best practices. And Natasha, if you need to share your screen, just let me know.
Yay! No, but I should have pulled up my Google Doc because I forgot. But as I do that, I'm going to talk because I do remember some things. But I just wanted to like show that this is a demonstration like between the community agreements, our crazy cookie chat, that we are asking y'all to show up very differently than you probably tend to in quote unquote education spaces, learning spaces, classroom spaces, right? We want folks who can lead through joy, who can like allow people to kind of pop off in the chat and be silly even while we are talking about really heavy stuff like systemic racism, right? Because we have to show up fully. And like this is just a clear demonstration of what we mean by that and just allowing us to just kind of like chill out. So I'm going to find my Google Doc and I'm going to talk to you about best practices. And mostly we're going to start with language justice. So a number of our classes and courses have language interpretation. So we would typically have simultaneous Spanish interpretation. There may be ASL, Bangla, just an example of a couple of languages. And we do that because one, that is the community that we serve, right? We organize in Black and Brown and immigrant communities and spaces. And we try not to be ableist, right, in our practices and in our spaces. So we want to make sure that folks have access and to learn it. But we also know that the intersection of both education justice and racial justice, there's a core part of that is language justice. That I cannot move forward in this fight. I cannot say that I am fighting for Black and brown bodies and then leave brown bodies behind in a Zoom classroom, right? Or leave Black bodies behind in a Zoom classroom because we don't have language justice. And so we do practice, we do our very best to practice what we preach. Best practices. I can't type and talk at the same time. Sorry, guys. So when we do our classes, we often will have simultaneous interpretation for folks. And when we do that, we also want to have translated materials. And so just a quick interpretation, definition between the two, because people tend to use them interchangeably, but they're different, right? Interpretation is spoken, right? So if we had someone doing interpretation, someone will be speaking in a different language to understand. Translations are written. So if you have documents that are being shared, you would need translation services. So I got that hammered in me over years of doing this work by interpreters. For me, using words interchangeably, and they'd be like, that's not how language works. So when we are doing this, typically, if you are in a class where this is needed, you would have to do a few things. Maybe I do want to share my screen so you can see this and follow this instruction along.
So I'm going to share mine so you can share yours.
I think I got it.
Okay, great.
I be knowing stuff, y'all. You knowing stuff. So the first thing you're going to do is typically at the bottom on that toolbar, there would be a little globy icon. Don't look for it today because this account doesn't have it. There would be a little globy icon. And you would go into that icon, you would click it, you would select the names of the interpreters. So let's say for this demonstration, Rachel was an interpreter. I see her beautiful face and she was giggling. So Rachel and Jesus are interpreters for today. I would click their names with Spanish and Japanese two random languages. And I will put that, and then I would press start. Before pressing start, though, I would have them both in those languages do like a interpretation opening. So it would start with hello, this something like hello. Today the organizers of this event have a commitment to language justice, and will go through their instructions in that language. And then someone would do it if it's another one in a different language, so for each language. And then one of them would do it finally in English. English would come last. And then then they would drop those same instructions into the chat box. So you want to maybe have someone ask the interpreter in advance to share that multiple times in the chat box, because as we know, if you come in late, you don't have access to what was in the chat box before your arrival, because we want folks to know. And this is the hardest parts around language interpretation is actually English speakers. We're assholes. Monolingual English speakers are assholes. I'll say it as one. We don't click the box. I don't need it. I don't speak no other language. Well, that's why you need it. Because someone else in another language is going to speak, and you have to understand. Or we just don't do the work, right? And so make sure that your English speaking participants understand the importance of them selecting English as their language. Because then say someone comes and is speaking in Japanese, then you don't understand anything. And then they interrupt that person and I can't understand anything. Well, you didn't click English, that's why. So make sure that they're doing those steps, right? And once again, if during the meeting, folks are writing in the chat, one thing that we want to do is what we're trying to do in best practices for this is make sure that when that language interpretation is needed, that we have a tech person available. And maybe one day that might be you. Like you might be like, I'll volunteer to be a tech person. Part of what we tell folks is that part of the practice is to translate the chat box as well, right? Like you can't have the chat box blowing up. You can't be like, I'm going to ask a question, right? What are your best practices when it comes to language interpretation? And then the chat box is blowing up and it's all in English. That's not going to work, right? Because now we're right back to the injustice. So we highly recommend the site. It's called DeepL. It's amazing. It's quick. It's fast. It's easy. It's free. And it's about 85% accurate. And you can use that to copy and paste things that are in the chat and put them into the chat either in whichever language is needed. So say someone wrote in Spanish, you can translate it to English. If it's in English, you can translate it to Spanish. In terms of materials, if there are things that you need, so say we had like this document, for example, this document should be translated. Because that's how language justice works, right? So if I needed this document translated for a different workshop we were doing, I would have 3 options. And so you would have 3 options. You can do it on your own. You can find your own translation service. You can translate it yourself. You can ask your auntie, and you can translate it. You can ask us to do it professionally. We need that at least 7 days in advance. Translators book up fast, and to get good stuff, you need a good amount of healthy time to make sure that it gets the turnaround. You can't do it in 24 hours for the most part. And know that once that document is translated, that's it. So you can't be like, oops, I changed, 5 of the slides at the last minute. Well, that's cute. Then you better change them back because this is already done, right? That's it. Or you can once again use the website DeepL. DeepL, and I've used this website literally all day. And DeepL really allows you to do something that Google Translate doesn't, and it allows you to translate entire documents. So you can translate an entire Google Doc, or I think Google Slides. I've done we have done in the midst of a workshop, translated an entire article through DeepL. So that is a site that you can use easily, quickly, for free. I would, if you can, have someone look over it just really quickly because it's not 100% accurate. And that's about it that I have around language and best practices around language. I don't remember what other best practices I was supposed to share, but that was a lot. And the one thing I want to stress is, language justice is hard. We have to be intentional in the practice and intentional in our growth in the practice. No one gets it 100% right all the time, right? Even me in my position, I've been in this position about 7 years as director of CJ, and we always do interpretation, and there's still times I mess it up, I get it wrong, I don't book an interpreter in time, I don't translate a document. But it's really about the intention you set, right? Being honest and transparent about it when things go a little awry, and not completely like losing yourself or beating yourself up about it. It happens. Why we gotta look at this slide with my face looking like that though? That's not. Why am I stuck with my face like that? That's mean. Felt like a war crime. But I think that was it. Was there something else I was supposed to share about best practices?
I think you are good. I am trying to find my screen share because
I know. I mean, also, this is also a best practice. The tech is not always going to work. Not always going to be able to find the button. You're going to forget where it is.
I was just going to jump in here because I know I'm next on the agenda. Natasha, you named it perfectly. That was going to be one of our best practices for online facilitation. It's not that technology sometimes doesn't work. It never works. It just never works, people. And if you can just accept that from the beginning, you just accept that as your new truth, that there's going to be a Zoom breakdown, right? And then there's less stress, less pressure in the long run. So just as Elizabeth perfectly modeled, just staying as cool as a cucumber. You just smooth, okay? They call you butter because you want to roll. You just glide on it, okay? You just dealing with the Zoom tech mess ups, right? Back in the day when there were in-person events, I used to say it's not a good event unless 3 things go wrong. I think that same rule applies for Zoom. It's not a good Zoom event unless 3 things goes wrong. It might be your waiting room, your translation, and your slides won't share, whatever it is. As long as you expect it, boo, you'll be all right. You'll be all right. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to note from what Natasha just shared and what I truly need to practice and what I would love for you all to hold me accountable with is slowing down. Yo, first of all, I'm hyper as hell, just by default. That's just who I am as a person. Second of all, I get really stressed because I'm like, we only have 5 minutes. We gotta talk fast, gotta move fast. So that brings me to my other Zoom rule, is that whatever you used to plan for in person or whatever you think you would plan for in person, you just got to cut that in half. When it comes to Zoom, less is more. Talking slower is better. Just less and slower. That should be your go-to rule. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Okay, so I'm going to speak slowly, share a few things, and turn it over to Wayne. So few things about online facilitation. You definitely want to acknowledge who's in this virtual room, who's in this space with you, right? You want to call people in by name. You want to honor their pronouns, right? And you want to give everyone the opportunity to speak at least once. And we typically do that through a check-in question, right? Depending on the size of the group that you're supporting, having everyone come off mute once or at least share in the chat once is critical to like maintaining good vibes, high vibes in this energy, in this virtual world that we're all navigating. The second thing is, as a facilitator, planning, preparing, and being in the practice of intentional spaces for silence. You see how I just modeled that? You see how I just did that right there? Okay, woo. So you want to practice that being in that silence, right? When you're not facilitating on the call in your own life, I want you to practice in the shower. I want you to practice while brushing your teeth. I want you to practice while preparing breakfast. Just practice being in that awkward silence because it's critical for digesting new information, right? It's critical for giving folks the opportunity to practice courage because people are deciding, oh, is now the time I'm going to come off mute? Oh, hey, hold on. I got to close 5 tabs before I share my screen. I don't want to embarrass myself. Let me clear my search history, right? Like we need all that time to gather ourselves, right? So you want to make sure that you are in the practice of holding silence. Wayne, you want to take it from here?
Thank you for that and for modeling that. So after this, we also have model vulnerability. And we ask you all to do this, especially if you're holding a class in which you're asking participants to share about themselves and who they are and why they're here. It's usually a good practice to do that first so that you can establish that space of like story sharing, of trust from the beginning. And after that, we have used tech features to your advantage. So I know everyone complains about Zoom and being on Zoom, but one of the really good things about it is that we can have breakout rooms where we can have smaller group discussions and people can get to know each other better. People who are often more hesitant to share might feel more comfortable in smaller groups. As a facilitator, we also encourage you to encourage participants to use the Zoom chat. And so it's this like, it's just a great thing where people can share their thoughts and things that they're thinking. We often value it equal as participation as like unmuting and speaking out loud. And it just gives people different options to share their thoughts and opinions and participate. And what else? The last thing on here is to incorporate creativity. So even though we're like sitting looking at computer screens, we don't have to just limit it to like talking. We can incorporate like stretches in our meeting spaces. You can open up a meeting having participants lead stretches for 30 seconds and going around like that as a check-in. When you ask about takeaways from class that day, people can express that as a body movement. You can encourage students to imagine that they're like sitting next to each other in a circle if they're like sharing or if they're doing yoga together. And taking that extra move to encourage that type of creativity and imagination oftentimes shifts the space in ways that you might not be able to like trace or to foresee until you do it.
Do we have, I just want to check in, Elizabeth, do we have 1 or 2 minutes to go a little bit longer in this section?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make space for you all to share the wisdom that you've been collecting. Like we're flirting with our year anniversary with COVID, right? In a few short months, we'll be a year in this. And you've been on a bunch of Zoom meetings. You all know some best practices. Jules, I'm looking at you specifically because you've been on the Liberation School calls for some time now. So I just want to create space for folks to drop in the chat or to come off mute, different tips and tricks for online facilitation.
Since I got named, no, not lucky. Anyway, I do Zoom for like presentations for a living, but one thing, because I'm also a fast talker, is any direction that I give, I also put in the chat, and now I will also translate it and put it in a chat, just so if you're like asking for people, it's good to give processing time, but I'm also like, oh, they have no idea what I just said, so I don't know, it's like a tiny little easy one, but just a good one.
Thank you, Jules, beautiful. Other tips and tricks? I know y'all got some gems.
I get, this is Maria. One thing that I've seen people do to kind of be mindful of how sometimes we shy away from sharing comments is that you're looking at, you know, people's mute button going on and off. And so like if you see someone unmute themselves and then put the mute back on, you know, it might be like, oh, like just kind of like encourages them to share. Like there's no dumb questions, right? So like just like, hey, you know, did you want to say something? And just kind of like call on that person to go ahead and share.
Beautiful. Thank you, Maria. I think we have time for two more tips or tricks. Matt, I see your hand, and then Jenny, I see your hand.
Yeah, a couple things. I think it's like has a lot to do with the space you create. So like music, incorporating music and like setting a tone and a vibe is always good. I think like checking questions that are not always serious, but that can like that get people to like think of like just, you know, random, you know, superpowers, whatever, just to get people like thinking outside of the box, I think is also helpful to break ice. And then I had another thing and I can't remember, so I'll pass it and put it in the chat.
Amazing. Thanks, Matt. We just had a good check-in question. What type of snow are you? Are you like 3-day-old snow that's dirty? Are you like a snowflake? Are you a flurry? You know, there's so many questions. Okay, Jenny, what else you got for us?
Particularly if depending on if there are little kiddos, which I am planning on having, and I work with every day, is using a lot of visuals also. So even just visuals for like mute and unmute and like other kinds of visuals so that kids, but also then those will, you know, not surpass, but like cut through all the languages. And so if you have visuals, then it's another way for people to understand, even if you're like, in addition to the translation, and then also if you have younger kiddos, it's especially helpful for them to see what you're telling them to do as well.
Yes, Jenny, we love a visual. Yes. Okay, I lied. Give me one more. Someone come off mute one last time before we move on. One more, please.
I'll go.
Bam. Y'all see that silence though? Did you catch the silence?
Yes.
All right, boom. Come on, Reba.
Making sure you're thinking of ways to engage with folks that are off camera. So not, you know, a lot of times the ones that are on camera are kind of at the top of the Zoom window or you can see them. But, you know, looking at the participant list, encouraging people, but also no shame in not coming off camera and thinking of ways to engage with them, whether it be in the chat or, you know, encouraging people to use the reaction buttons, whatever it is. If someone, you know, you can't see them nodding along, but you want to figure out if they are engaged or affirming, make sure everyone's called in.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Reba. Thank you everyone who shared recommendations. And I saw those in the chat as well. Thank you for Elizabeth for collecting them and adding them to the doc. And I'm not sure who's after me, but Shine.
So next we have Carla, Leanne, Naya, who's going to be talking a little bit about Integrate NYC and some of the exciting classes that young people will be leading, facilitating, and just a whole bunch of dopeness.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carla again. And I mentioned this earlier, but we're going to talk a little bit about the youth track and what youth are doing to kind of make sure that we have young people facilitating classes and also attending classes. So yeah, we really want to prioritize having youth in like individuals holding space or youth-led organizations holding space, whether that be through like workshops or we'll have some performances by youth. We've thought about doing potentially digital design. So I know at Integrate, we have a social media page that we work really hard to keep looking good. And the people designing those visuals on our Instagram page are youth. And we definitely have people who are really experienced in that skill. So we really want to encourage digital design so people know how to work social media and also just any skills that youth might have, having the space to share that as well. And I'll pass it to Leanne to talk a little bit more about the political education classes.
Hi everyone, my name is Leanne. I use she, they pronouns. I'm the Executive Cause Director of Integrate. And for the political education classes, we wanted to include more disability justice, particularly disability justice as it pertains to the history of people of color. with disabilities in this like realm of activism, different aspects on the history of racism and what's currently being done by adult and young people alike. And then looking at different social structures and power dynamics that exist in the world at large and how we as young people can help break down those structures or just navigate them as they are. And we also want to be looking at utilizing social media as an organizer or the impact that it can have on society, like as for you as an individual. I'll pass it back to Carla.
Yeah, and so I know that one of the classes that we're really focusing on right now is performances by youth through the Epic Theater organization, and that includes actual plays and like works performed by youth centered around school segregation and culturally responsive curriculum. So I will pass it to Elizabeth now to talk more about class support.
Yep. All right, hi y'all. So my name is Elizabeth Velasquez. I am the Liberation School Coordinator. You may have seen me all up in your inboxes. You're probably tired of seeing my name, emailing y'all, sending y'all Eventbrite, flyers, all the things. So this is my face. I know we've been faceless before this meeting. So thank you for being here. My main job is to help support your class setup and your technical needs. You're gonna see me looking over here because I have 2 screens because I'm screen sharing and I can't see my notes. So I'm not ignoring y'all. So I'm gonna take you through what happens behind the scenes with tech and class setups and in front of the scenes so that we're clear as to how things get on the calendar, how do folks become Liberation School teachers, etc. So the way that classes get on the Liberation School calendar is twofold. In the beginning of the year, CEJ put out a call for volunteers alongside Integrate NYC, alongside NYU, for community teachers. And you may have seen that call because that's the reason y'all are here, because of that call. So you all answered that call, and then we communicate with you to invite you to teach the class that you said you were excited about teaching and we were excited about reading about. And so once everyone has agreed, we then send over a link to our internal Liberation School calendar, which I will share here so that we are on the same page. Haha. Okay. All right, so this is our Liberation School calendar, which most of you have seen. And this is where facilitators or community teachers fill in the information about their class. So you enter your class description, your class date, your class title, your class time, etc. And if there are conflicts in time, this is the calendar internally that helps us coordinate and helps us find the time and date that's not conflicting with anybody else's class. Or a time and date that will best serve your class population. So for example, a lot of our parents and young people, community members are in school or work or just got mad appointments during the day, right? So our classes tend to start after 4 p.m. because we know that that is our target population. So we ask all facilitators who are joining us as community teachers to fill out this form. You all have filled it out. And this is how we then internally put your classes on the Liberation School calendar. So once these classes are solidified internally, then we can add them onto our Eventbrite, which is how people will register for your classes, and to our website calendar. So I wanted to show y'all that real quickly. We'll stop sharing again. I'm gonna become such an expert at this share screen thing that by the end of the year, it's gonna be a wrap. It's gonna be seamless. You're not even gonna see what's happening.
You already got it. It's just
It's a little glitchy for my taste. It's a little glitchy for my taste, but we're gonna get there.
That's called interest. It's making it interesting. You're building.
Okay, so this is our Liberation School website. Shout out to the folks who have worked really, really hard on this site. There are two ways to sign up for your classes. One way is the calendar. So folks will come here and register on the calendar. This is a way to see all of the classes that are happening at Liberation School at a glance. So you can see here, February, if you have a class on our internal calendar, then you have a class on our website calendar. And we have classes solidified, shout out to y'all, through June. And what happens if folks want to register for a class? They literally just click on a class. So we're gonna click Intro to Yoga, shout out to Caroline. And I've made a commitment to myself to do yoga the whole month of February. So I will be in the yoga classes because I need to stretch and move. So that's my commitment to myself. Anybody wants to join me in that challenge? That would be great. So Intro to Yoga, you click on the link, you automatically see the flyer. You can kind of see the facilitator. My font game needs to be upped. But you can go straight to the Eventbrite. So you can click here and it will take you to Caroline's class to register. Bam. Right now, the tickets are registered in English and in Spanish. We're working on adding other languages. So if folks, this is how we know if folks, oh, this one has all the languages. I didn't add them to all of them yet. So if folks need to attend the Intro to Yoga and do not require translation, they're gonna click on this ticket. If folks need Introduction to Yoga in Spanish, they're gonna click on this ticket, and then we're gonna know, oh, Caroline, you have 4 folks that are requesting translation for Spanish classes. And we're gonna get into how that works, but I just wanted you to see from the user end what getting tickets in the specific language that you need looks like. So this is how we know internally how many folks are signed in for each language. If no folks are signed in for English, Chinese, Bangla, then we know that your class is strictly going to be an English speaking class. Does that make sense? So that is our Eventbrite, and that you can be taken to that through this link here, click. There's a small description of your class here. If you would like to change that, just email me and be like, yo, I want my description to be more popping than that. I'm not really feeling it. I really took this directly from your descriptions, but this is your class. So please let me know what it is that you need. Folks can also add to their own calendar from here. So if I wanted to add this to my Google Calendar, I can click here, Yahoo Calendar. I don't know how people are still using Yahoo, but apparently that's a thing. So I'm not internet provider shaming. If you're using Yahoo, shout out to you. There's an Outlook calendar, there's the iCalendar. So you can really choose to add this to your calendar as well as a participant. So this is the calendar. This is one way that folks can sign up. The other way that folks can sign up is by clicking enroll in a class. And once they hover over enroll in a class, it will show you the different tracks that we have. So we're operating on the political education track, wellness track, and the academic track. And if you just want to see all the classes, then you'll click on all classes. So that's what we'll do here. We'll click on all the classes. And here you can see at a glance all of the classes that Liberation School has to offer. You can click on any one of these and it'll take you directly to the same place we went to the Eventbrite. They're also in Spanish. So we have the English here, and then we have the Spanish flyers here. It's the same thing for the wellness. Y'all laughing, so I know y'all cracking up in the chat. And it's like, I want to see, but I can't because I'm like going. but I'm gonna check after and I'm gonna laugh too. But I do want to say that it's really beautiful to see y'all laughing in the chat. I mean, to see your laughing faces. So whatever it is that's going on in the chat, keep it going, because it's really beautiful to see on this end. Okay, so wellness and healing. Again, the flyers are in English and in Spanish. And again, we can click on any of these graphics and it'll take you straight to the registration. So 2 ways, it just depends on what kind of learner you are, what kind of person you are, if you need to see things at a glance to check your calendar, or if you're the type of person that likes to see things categorized. I'm looking for wellness, I'm looking for academic, I'm looking for political education. So those are the 2 main ways that folks are signing up. Any questions on that? I will check. Dope. Okay, so once those classes are solidified in our internal calendar, we add them to our Eventbrite, our website calendar, and then we make the Zoom links for your classes based on whether or not your class needs interpretation services or not. How do we know if your class needs interpretation services? Folks sign up and buy or get tickets based on their language, and then on our end we know. So y'all never have to worry about that. We will let you know if folks are requiring interpretation services. So there are important notes to know about the Zoom accounts. So there are 2 Zoom accounts. One is a regular Zoom account that has no translate capability. That is just our regular Zoom account. That is the account that we are on right now. And the other is a Zoom account that does have translate capability. And the reason why y'all need to know that there are 2 Zoom accounts is if folks do not require translation services for your class, then you as the facilitator will be signing in to our regular Zoom account with our account username and password and begin your class as if it were your regular Zoom account. So we will be emailing you the username and password. But if folks attending your class identify that they require translation, then we will set up the Zoom account and you will sign on to the Zoom using your own Zoom account, because the tech on that end is a little bit more complicated and y'all got a lot of work to do, and we trying to look out for y'all. We're not trying to have you do any of the wild interpretation. You got to call. No. We will do it. All you got to do is sign in. So to recap that, because I know that can be like a little bit confusing. There are 2 Zoom accounts, translation and regular. You will be emailed before your class starts to let you know. We usually email you the day before to let you know if you are signing in with the regular account or if you're signing in through your account as for the translation. So if you have no translation services, you will sign in as Liberation School, right? On our account, on our regular account. If your class requires translation, we will just email you the link that you just need to show up and teach, and we will handle all the tech. We also book the interpreters. So you don't have to worry about booking the interpreters. Hopefully, if your materials require interpretation. So if you're doing yoga, you may have yoga, sheets or whatever that but you may not, you're just showing up and breathing and doing space. So you may not need that. But if you're somebody that is teaching a class that has materials that may need to be translated, remember the language justice best practices, just make sure to get that to us 7 days before your class starts. Okay, so I just wanted to share so that y'all see what the regular Zoom account looks like on our end. Wow, look at me. Okay. So you will, if your class does not require interpretation, you will sign in as Liberation School. We will email you the username and the password. You will then head down to meetings, click meetings, and you will see upcoming. All of your classes are already here. All you got to do is look for your class. So Caroline, on Monday, February 8th, unless we send you an email that says we have translation services, here's the link, you will be signing in to Liberation School and you will click start to start your meeting. Everyone's class is here until we have folks that require interpretation services, and then you will not be using this link. But just to be efficient, we have added everyone's class here. Okay, so that's what that looks like. How to let people into your session. We want to make sure that participants attending your classes are in a safe environment. Last year, there was a whole bunch of Zoom bombing going on, and Zoom bombing was when folks who just had nothing better to do with their lives during a pandemic just came and interrupted people's Zooms, interrupted the feed, just really horrible, horrible folks. And so that's why we defaulted all the classes to have waiting rooms. So when users join a class, they will be placed in a waiting room where then you, the host, can choose who to allow into the meeting. You can also choose as a double kind of protection to enable a password for your class, for your participants. If that is the case, then just email me that password and I will make sure to get that out to participants. Huiying talked a little bit about breakout rooms. Some facilitators might choose to use breakout rooms as part of their class agenda. Breakout rooms allow facilitators to split students into smaller groups. So if you decide to do that with your class, best practices for breakout rooms with monolingual speakers. Yes, you may have some non-English speakers in your classroom. So if you do, again, we will have the interpretation set up. And in the event that breakout rooms are a part of your class, please be mindful that monolingual speakers will need to be in a room with a translator. Again, if your class is a translated class, then we do most of the text, so you probably won't even have to worry about we'll be putting the rooms in the breakout rooms. But if you're signed into our regular Zoom chat, which means that there are no translation requirements to be conscious of, you're signing in as Liberation Schools, then you can choose how you would like to utilize or break up participants. So signed into regular Zoom, you can choose how to break up participants. If we are signed in during with the Zoom interpretation, then we are being mindful that we are making sure that monolingual speakers are in a room with a translator. Does that make sense? Bam. I know this is all like boring tech stuff, but I want to make sure that y'all got it. Okay, so reminding folks of community agreements as they go away into the breakout rooms, right? Community agreements do not stop existing in breakout rooms, so just be mindful of that. And I am going to turn it over to Huiying, who's going to talk about recording classes and best practices for recording.
Okay. So we encourage you to try to record your classes, especially if it's something like yoga or some academic support class, because it can, we'll put it in an archive to share with participants who aren't able to make it at that time for whatever reason. And so when you record, it's good to check in with folks beforehand because not everyone is comfortable doing so. And some tips to, I guess, like record in a way that doesn't have to record participants who don't want to be recorded is to pin yourself or to spotlight yourself as the host, which you can do on Zoom, in the top, I'm trying to point it to you, the top right-hand corner, there's 3 dots. So if you click on that, that gives you the option to pin yourself or to spotlight. And that'll put you center stage with the participants as just like little boxes if you're recording. And another logistic for how to record is it's just on the bottom of your Zoom bar. There's going to be like a round recording button, and you just click it and it records. That's it. And it gets saved into our Liberation School Zoom account. And so once you log into the Zoom account, there's a tab that says recordings, and that's where you can find all of the class recordings. But we handle it from there after you click record and stop it, and so you don't need to worry about any of the other stuff.
Awesome. All right, so then I have just two, thank you, Wayne. I have 2 more things to share around class setup. And okay. So connecting with class participants before or after class, you might need to send materials out to students before a class or after a class. I am your point person. Please email me any communication to send out to participants at least 48 hours before the class starts. I know that there might be some last minute things happening, so that's fine. We flexible, we roll with things. But if you can send the all of the things that you need sent out to your class at least 48 hours. And any materials that you need to send out to students at least 48 hours after the class ends. So there may be some times where things happen in the chat and or in the class, and people bring up really good ideas, and you want to add that to a document, and folks are like, oh, can you share that? Right? That wasn't initially part of your materials. Then you can definitely send that to me after the class, and I'll make sure to get that to the students. So student access to materials given before or after class via the coordinator. I will be emailing that via Eventbrite to participants who signed up. The other thing is we have a new feature that we're rolling out that we're really excited about based on feedback, their feedback forms, LOL, feedback twice in a sentence. So we got from teachers last semester on getting feedback from the participants on their class. So we will be sending out feedback forms to students immediately after the class and aggregate that information to help us know what is working really well and what we can improve on. And we'll be sharing that with the team. Recording classes for the cloud, Huing talked about that. Some classes we also stream on Facebook Live. And so it's really, it's just a really good option for folks who are not able to attend on that day, but can come back and watch the class on Facebook Live. Access to Liberation School logos. All promotional materials are created by Liberation School social media team. Shout out to Larissa. And so you can either email me any information that you want on a flyer or any idea that you have for a graphic, and then we can work together to make that happen. We have a new Slack that teachers will be a part of. I will be emailing out that information to everyone by the end of this week so that we're all onboarded onto Slack. Slack is a communication tool. It's just a really quick and easy way for folks to be in community with each other. And I'm really excited about us being on that forum together. And then two last things. So we this semester wanted to make sure that we are really building out community with community. You are part of a team, right? We're all part of the same team. And so we want to know more about you. So we'll be sending out a getting to know you, getting to know all about you form so that we can introduce not only your class to students, but also just who you are in community and how you exist in the world. We also are thinking about doing some social media takeovers where you take over our social media and just share with the world about your class or about what inspires you to teach. So look out for that in the coming weeks. And the last thing we'll talk about is cohort versus drop-in, which is something that we got asked about last semester. So most of our classes are drop-in classes, which means that folks can attend whatever class they want, even when they want, even if they are weekly classes. So you may find that you're running a weekly class and folks come to your class every week. And so you can kind of begin to form like this organic cohort of folks that come to your class all the time. And if you're doing a series of classes, then folks signing up to that series may already have in mind that the people that they start the class with are the people that they're going to finish the class with, which is not always the case. So you may have folks that attend the first class or your first week and not attend the second week, right? Or you may have class that don't folks that don't attend the first class in your series or did not attend your first week and may attend your second class in the series or your second week. So for purposes of access, whether we're running a series weekly or bi-weekly or monthly, or a series of classes, we want to be mindful as facilitators that the information is still valuable, even if folks are attending one class or they're attending all classes, which means that there may be things that interlink your classes, but keep in mind that folks are leaving with valuable information that is framed in a way that is inclusionary to wherever folks are or however folks are arriving in your class in their learning of this particular subject. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, classes can be a series with a dedicated cohort. However, and classes can be weekly or monthly, but be mindful that most folks can drop in and do drop in and drop out as well. So just be mindful of that when you're preparing your classes and preparing to teach. And that is what I got. I felt like that was a lot of information. So if you need to take a collective breath or drink some water, we can. How are folks feeling? Do we need to take like a 5-minute break before we head into our last section, or we just want to power through? Power through? Okay, dope. All right, so I'm gonna turn it over to Josh from Integrate NYC, who's gonna talk about what teacher support looks like this semester.
Hey everyone, I'm sorry, I actually forgot to introduce myself. I'm Josh with Integrate NYC. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm involved in the team for pedagogical excellence with Liberation School. And so I wanted to talk about one of the things we're going to be offering for teacher support coming up this go around. And so the first thing we're going to be talking about every month is workshops. So we're going to be focused on supporting you guys in development as teachers around Liberation School pedagogy. And so what that's going to be is not only culturally responsive education, which we're going to be focusing on, and what that looks like. And it looks like all the things these brilliant educators have shared early on, but it's also going to be combining that with our political education. I know some of you are already teaching political education classes, so we were going to provide an example of that. But overview of culturally responsive teaching, just recognizing that students are coming to these classes with assets, with their own cultural knowledge and systems of knowing and backgrounds. And so it's student-centered instruction that centers those things. And that's what Liberation School is, what they were doing in Freedom School. So we're doing Liberation School. Our students are assets. And so we want to highlight educators that practice culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy. But we also want to tie that to political education. That is the element of Liberation School that we're focusing on. And so the first workshop we're going to be having in February is going to be with an educator, Jose Vilson, and he actually provided us with a brief clip of what that culturally responsive pedagogy mixed with a political education might look like. Elizabeth, is that up? Coming. There we go. One more. Oh, sorry.
Wait.
Do you want me to share my?
Yeah. If you can share, that would be great.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, great. Hold on 1 second, and I can pull it right up. Okay, got it. It's about 8 minutes or so. Let's share my screen now. Can everyone see?
Here's a good question, and let me actually get to it now because it's 12:50. So let's go. Okay, you may see a headline or maybe some sort of fact that comes out in headlines. And this is the way that people play with math, right? Like they just kind of make the numbers kind of ambiguous to the point where you start saying, that doesn't sound like a lot. So here's a good example of that. The number of deaths from COVID-19 in the United States is 0.1% of all cases. Doesn't sound like a lot because obviously if you go back to your 6th, 7th grade math teaching, you'll recognize that, or your math learning, I should say, you'll recognize that 0.1% is way less than 1%, right? So it doesn't sound like a lot. But then the issue is, here are the actual numbers. You notice that the U.S. has 402 total deaths as reported by the World Health Organization, and there's been a total of 332,930. It doesn't account for brand new cases, for example. It doesn't account for all the folks who haven't gotten tested. It doesn't account for any number of different factors here. These are the ones that have been recorded officially as per the World Health Organization and whatever the United States decides to report. So those things actually matter in the way of what we're doing. Oh, speaking of former students, hi, Annifer, I see you. Thank you for coming through. So now I have 20. Noticing, right, that this kind of headline is deceitful, right? Like it's a straight up lie in the way that it's told. There's two types of lies that I like to say. One is that you just straight up don't tell the truth at all, or two, you provide a fact that's based on a way to skew something to make it look like fiction. And this could be one of the ways that people try to say, well, we should be able to get back to work sometime in mid-April. Let's put some facts out there, right? So 0.1%, maybe you can want to analyze that at home. Here's something for you to consider. So 0.1%, actually, let me change the marker to red because as it turns out, I really do think that's a really important thing. Here, 0.1%, if you're thinking about that percent in terms of 100, that becomes 0.1 out of a possible 100. Okay, still sounds minuscule, except when you try to turn that into a whole number, and I did this math with some of my students this morning, was you'll recognize that 0.1 out of 100 is when I use the form of one, Common Core math, shout out, right? Form of one. Okay. That's basically saying you have 1 out of every 1,000 deaths that have occurred in the United States. That doesn't sound like a lot, except that, we pretty much got a late start as compared to the rest of the countries out there, right? So there's cases like Italy, think about South Korea, even China, mainland, where you have bigger numbers, but those numbers are slowing down. Whereas the United States, we're just still 1 in every 1,000. So that means I would say you only have about 2 or 3 degrees, and it's getting closer, by the way, 2 or 3 degrees of somebody who may have had the COVID-19, right? That's a really
So I'm gonna stop it there. Wasn't gonna show the whole thing, but the idea here is that one, education is telling a story. Culturally responsive education is bringing in, the voices, the knowledge, the assets that oftentimes marginalized people have, and so it is inherently political. And so what we're going to be highlighting is culturally responsive educators that also have deepened their level of practice to address these things and to make their course content, no matter what it is, in a liberation school liberatory. And so we'll be doing that once a month for this go round of liberation school. And with that, I'll pass it back to.
Whew. All right, so that was a lot of information. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody who shared. We want to open it up for questions before we end. If y'all have any questions, if you have any thoughts, feel free to either type them in the chat or unmute yourselves. Also, if you don't have any questions right now, but later on things pop up in your head, you can always feel free to email us. We will leave some space for questions or thoughts that folks may have.
Reba raised her hand, and I see Jenny raising her hand.
So we'll start with Reba.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. Thanks, Elizabeth. How do we see or how do we know who signed up for our classes as of now? Like, do we get a roster? I know you said in advance we'll know, and we'll know which Zoom link to use, but is there a way for us to see as folks are signing up so we can get excited and plan accordingly?
Yeah, you can always feel free to check in on me whenever you want to get an idea of how many people are in your class. Folks have been signing up. Really excited. And we have been doing the outreach. And this week we're gonna kind of go hard on outreach. So I would suggest that you, I'll send a folder out with the flyers, but promote your classes to your social media channels. Let folks know that you'll be teaching with Liberation School. Promote each other's classes. Feel free to attend each other's classes, hype each other up. But yes, I will definitely be sending out before your class starts, at least 24 hours before. I'll send out a list of how many folks will be in your class, but you can feel free to check in with me at any time. Like, where are my numbers? Where am I? How many folks are in my class?
Thank you.
And then Jenny?
This might.
You're breaking up a little bit.
You can answer offline if that's easier, but let me come closer to the internet.
Okay.
Can you hear me better now? I think this might be specific to me, so if you want to answer offline, that's cool too. But since my class is bilingual, what will that mean for translation?
If Natasha, you want to answer this?
Answer that.
Okay.
I don't remember which class is yours.
Story time.
So tell me the story time, bilingual story time.
Yeah.
So say to me real quickly, like, do you mean that you will both be speaking in English and in Spanish? Got it. But you're reading a book.
Yes, some that will be both English and Spanish, some that will be Spanish, some that will be more English.
So I would say if the book, so I'm gonna tell you a thing. So I don't even know. Interpreters hate when you do the I can talk both languages and then I just do it mid-sentence all the time. They hate that. So that's why I was asking questions. I think if you're reading a book and say like it's fully in Spanish, then you would have the interpreter just interpret at the same time for the English, right? And vice versa if a book was in English with Spanish. If a book is actually bilingual, and I would say like really look at the book and see if it's one of those types of books, because some books are different, right? Like some do the exact translation in English and Spanish as you're going through the book. Some do, like I'm telling the story kind of like in English and in Spanish. So if it's a book like that where the book bounces back and forth, I would say you should hit me up beforehand, me and Elizabeth, and we can talk about it with the interpreter to figure out the best thing. Because what may need to happen is that they may just need like a photocopy of the book itself so that they can follow along.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Anybody else? Yeah, so does Liberation School have a social media page, or is it the NYC CEJ one? It is the NYC CEJ one. That is where we are promoting all Liberation School materials and graphics. Anybody else? Any other questions? Any thoughts? Any shout outs? I like shout outs. I'm from the 90s. I used to call into the radio station to give shout outs. So when you hear me ask if there's any shout outs, that's the mindset that I'm in, the 90s radio station mindset. Okay, going once.
I want to shout you out, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
We, for all of your work and all of your facilitating tonight. And you and I had been working together for a bit on the Slack, and there was something I was supposed to do, and I kind of transparently dropped the ball on it, and I reached out to follow up and say I didn't get to this yet, and you were like, it's done. So really appreciate you for all of your work both in this space and outside of it.
So thank you. I just want to say that there is no dropping the ball when we're talking about liberation. There's only passing it.
Yes,
So,
I like that.
Yeah, we don't drop the ball here. We pass it. We pick it up from each other.
Thank
So
you.
shout out to you for extending that help, and shout out to Hui Ying for connecting. Shout out to Natasha for the brainchild. Shout out to the team. Shout out to every single one of y'all who said yes, who are here, who spent 2 hours with us. And yes. Thank y'all. Anything else before we head out? We ended early.
I just want to quickly say to folks, thank you again for doing this. This is such important and deep work. But also, I just invite y'all to think about, I love Afrofuturism. I'm an Afrofuturist, right? I'm constantly envisioning myself deep into the future. And just really allow this to be a moment of like, what is my ultimate, most radical, most freeing, most liberatory way in which I wish I could teach, and then teach that way, right? And like really use this as an invitation to be like, I'm going to use this as a space to not just break down all of the systems that are, but to start building the systems that should be.
Ooh.
Get juicy in it, right? So it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be hard, and sometimes it don't work. You be like, oh, I want to do that, and you be like, oh, that was a bad idea. That didn't work at all. Like, but so what? It didn't work, and then life happened anyway. Life moved on. So try it, and it might, even when it don't work, you still learn something great, and it was still fun. We tried to do chant all together a couple of times, and that didn't work. But I got the best laugh of my life that day. So just use it as an invitation to be your biggest and your fullest and your most liberatory self, so that folks can come and be that with you.
We got some affirmations in the chat. Natasha, Shayna said, I needed that. Yes. Rachel definitely needed that. And Tazy says, thank you, Natasha, for envisioning this. So I love the love. I love the love. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I will be emailing this Zoom to everyone. So if you missed anything or you need to refresh, don't worry about it. We got it on video. And we will also be following up with the best practices document by the end of the week. All right, give me some time. So I'll try to get that to you by Friday, end of the day. And next week we are starting classes. So start to promote yourselves. We'll be starting promoting heavy starting tomorrow. Yeah, see you in class. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Bye. Have a dope night.
Bye, everyone.
Get some rest. Dope ass job, Elizabeth.
Dope ass job, everybody.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go do
Yeah.
some other work
Go
now.
do something. I'm gonna go eat some food and watch TV. And
Yes, my son made dinner, so I'm gonna go
what
eat.
mate?
He made like shredded chicken, like barbecue chicken in the crock pot.
You better have a son that that cooks you dinner. I can't wait. I'm
I'm
counting
gonna
down.
like toast up some tortillas.
I
Go
see.
some
So
slap.
I'm turning off my computer. I don't want to hear nothing.
I'm gonna do like one more thing, but I'm gonna like do one thing and then one half of a thing, but I'm gonna watch TV while I do it.
Do it. I support this. I think we have a meeting tomorrow with the
At
adult
1.
education.
Yes.
Okay.
Good.
All right. I'll see you mañana.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.